what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. So the moment we've all been waiting for, the Prague Pro prejudging just wrapped up. And it was a really interesting prejudging. So in that first call-out, you had all the guys that we kind of expected to see there. You had Keon Pearson, you had Samson Dauda, you had Martin Fitzwater. Pavel Barron was in there. That was kind of a surprise. You also had Joan Perdels. And, of course, Michael Krizo was in there. So we've talked pretty much about all these guys going into the show. Not really a surprise to see them in the first call-out. I think the biggest surprise was that in both the first and final call-out, Keon was not moved at all. He stayed on the end of both call-outs the entire time, I think suggesting that they have Keon in fifth place here, which is it's a bit surprising to me they didn't move Keon. I will say, though, I didn't think that Keon was going to be top two here after watching prejudging. I don't think it's not like I think he got robbed of a top two position. I think this show was very clearly going to be between Martin and Samson once we saw that first call out. So it's not like I think had he been moved, he would have been top two or won the show. I would have liked to see him get a better look or get moved around a little bit more than he did, which was not at all. He didn't get moved once the entire prejudging either call out. Now, the standout of this show for me was Martin Fitzwater. I wanted to show this video from Rep 1 of Martin's individual routine. I think by far this is the best version of Martin that we've ever seen. He looked incredible here. Absolutely nailed his peak. I think he definitely looked better than the Olympia. His conditioning was nuts here. And I think you really got to give Martin credit. He's coming in to this Prague show now 2 years in a row. And I guess we're going to have to start calling him the Dream Killer, like Phil Heath, because last year when he won Prague, he beat Chris Bumstead, who made his open debut. It seems almost certain at this point that he's also going to beat Keon Pearson, 212 Mr. Olympia champ, making his open debut. And I think he might win this show. I think Martin looks that good. Now, Samson, we definitely have to give Samson credit here, too. He looked significantly better than he looked at the Olympia. We know that his game plan going into this show was to come in bigger, to come in heavier, and I think that's exactly what you saw here. This 300-pound version of Samson compared to the 280-pound version of Samson at the Olympia looked a lot fuller. I thought his conditioning looked tighter. Just a much better overall version of Samson. He definitely made the improvements. And really, when you consider the fact that it was 2 weeks in between the Olympia and this show, it was a significantly improved version of Samson. So he definitely brought it here. I think he got some redemption here. I still think I would give it to Martin. I think that Martin looked incredible here. And if he was ever going to flip that placing and place ahead of Samson, because some people were arguing that he should have at the Olympia, I think this would be the year, or this would be the show. I don't think that I have literally ever seen Martin look this good. He deserves all the credit in the world. This was an incredibly detailed, incredibly hard, conditioned, just overall, it was a fantastic version of Martin, and I think that he really brought up some of his weaker poses. I think he looked a lot better from the back, like the back double bicep, for example. Just overall, I really want to see Martin win this. I think he deserves it. I think if he's ever going to beat Samson, like I said, and flip those placings, I think this would be the show. This was an incredible version of Martin. He's really taking scalps here. I mean, again, back-to-back Prague Pros. It looks like he's going to beat both Chris Bumstead from last year and Keon from this year, squashing two of the biggest open debuts that we've ever anticipated or seen. So Martin deserves a lot of credit here. I will say the lighting here was not the greatest. I'm sure a lot of you guys noticed that, especially on some of the darker guys like Keon and Samson. It was a little bit harder to see the finer details on their physique. The lighting wasn't great. The background wasn't great. The color and brightness of the background just wasn't conducive to really showcasing these physiques to the best of the ability that they could have. I was a little bit surprised with how bad the lighting was here, considering this lighting thing has become such a major talking point in bodybuilding with really every show. So I was surprised to see that. And then James Hollingshead was not at the show. He was supposed to compete. He was on the competitor list. We still don't know what happened with James. He wasn't there. He didn't compete. And I'm kind of curious because when they started the prejudging, they said the bodybuilders aren't ready yet, so we're going to run 20 minutes late. So they just kind of paused the show for 20 minutes and then did prejudging 20 minutes later. So I don't know if that had anything to do with why James didn't compete or why James wasn't there, or if it had anything to do with James at all, but they did have a late start to the show, and they said the reason was because the bodybuilders weren't ready. So I don't know what that means or what exactly that was, but we do know that James wasn't there. So let's get into the final call out for the top 5. So this is where it got interesting because, again, they didn't move Keon, but they didn't necessarily have to in this call out because over the course of this final call out, they did put basically everybody next to him. He got to stand next to Martin by the way they moved Martin. He got to stand next to Samson by the way they moved Samson. He got to stand next to Krizo by the way they moved Krizo. But still, the majority of the call out seemed like it's going to be between Samson and Martin for the win. And it really seems like, based on the first and this call out, that they're comparing Joan Pradels and Michael Krizo for third and fourth. And it just kind of looks like how they move these guys around and the lack of movement for Keon. It seems like they solidly have Keon in fifth, which is surprising to me because, yes, I'll say, like, Keon did look small in this lineup. And, of course, that was to be expected. He just came off the 212 stage. He didn't have a full offseason to prep for this. We were expecting to see a similar-sized Keon with how he looked at the Olympia. But I don't think he looked bad here. I feel like he could have been a little tighter through the glutes and hamstrings. I feel like the lower body maybe looked a little bit flat here. I don't think the midsection looked as bad as it looked at the Olympia. Like, overall, for an open debut, I thought this was a pretty good look for Keon. I don't think he was off. I don't think he missed the mark. I don't think he was quite tight enough to be in that top 2. But I think the surprising thing is, it looks like Krizo and Joan Pradels are going to be placing ahead of him. And Joan looked really impressive. We talked about him going into the show. Krizo looked really impressive going into the show. I feel like he looked a little bit flat here. And I think another thing that's important to point out is that this is a 2-day show. So prejudging is today, Saturday, and the finals is tomorrow, Sunday. So it's like the Olympia. So there's significant time in between prejudging and finals for these guys to make changes and improvements, and you could see a very different result for the finals based on who comes in better and who comes in worse. It is worth pointing out that, like at the Olympia, for example, Keon came in much better for the finals. Martin typically comes in much better for the finals. At the Olympia, it is interesting, though. Samson actually scored worse at the finals than he did at the prejudging for the Olympia, and that's when Andrew Jacked moved up into that third-place spot, or at least solidly became that third-place spot, and Samson lost a few points at the final. So it's hard to say what's going to happen tomorrow, but it does look like, based on these call-outs, that the judges at least have both Joan Pradels and Michael Krizo ahead of Keon. Now, I'm guessing it's mostly a size thing. I'm guessing that's it because these guys are much bigger than Keon. I think in some of these cases, we're talking 50, 60, 70 pounds potentially heavier than Keon. And it looks like that size difference with Keon just stepping off the 212 stage was significant enough to keep him out of the conversation for the win. And we did kind of talk about this in the last preview video for this show, that this is the interesting, exciting thing about an open bodybuilding debut with a guy like Keon because, you know, on one hand, you could have that crazy scenario where Keon wins his open debut and beats all these crazy guys. But we did talk about how, on the other hand, there is risk to it. If size is an issue for Keon in open bodybuilding, you could have a guy like Joan Pradels and Michael Krizo. These guys could also beat him. It might not just be Samson and Martin. You could have these other guys that are much bigger. If they're in good shape, they could beat him too. And it looks like that's what's going to happen here. So I think when it comes down to it, the fact that they didn't move him, in my mind, it has to be a size thing. Because I think he was tighter. I think he was tighter than Joan, especially from the back. I think he was fuller than Krizo. I think Krizo looked a little flat here. He didn't look as freaky as he looked in some of the updates that we saw. But I wouldn't really say that Keon was off. So in my mind, it has to be a size thing. So maybe they just want him to put on more muscle for open. But I feel like the thing with Keon is like kind of the same knock on Derek and Hadi, is he's so much shorter than the other guys. when we're talking about the size difference, I feel like he looks so much smaller on stage because of his height. But again, when we have that like pound for pound conversation, how does Keon look pound for pound? Does he look small pound for pound? I don't necessarily think that's the case. I just think that his height is like so visibly different on stage than these other guys. He's just so much shorter. I feel like you think of him as smaller when you look at him, and it's mostly the height. That's how I'm seeing it. But then when he stands next to Martin, they're like the same height, and I think I've got Martin winning the show. But without a doubt, Martin was he was more conditioned, he was tighter, he was harder than Keon. Even if Keon were moved into the center next to Martin, I would have to say Martin all day. This was the best Martin I think I've ever seen, and it was very impressive. Samson could take it too. Again, we do have a second day of the show, so it's not like one of these shows where it's an hour in between prejudging and finals and nothing really changes. It's like the Olympia. A lot could change between today and tomorrow. So I don't think these results are set in stone. Hopefully, if Keon comes back tighter, he gets maybe a better look at the finals and maybe gets moved around a little bit more. But to me, that's kind of the surprise of the show, that it looks like Keon is not going to be in the top 3 and is probably going to be 5th. Just based on the way they moved him, that's really what it looks like. It is surprising to me, but if I'm being honest, you guys know how much I like Keon. I'm a big fan of his physique. I consider him to be a friend. I can't honestly say that I would have had Keon top 2 here, but I think 5th is a bit surprising. So I guess I've got a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, obviously, give me your predictions in the comments below. Based on this prejudging, how do you have this playing out? Who do you have winning? I think it's almost certainly between Samson and Martin at this point. I don't think there's really any debate about that. At this point, after prejudging, it's going to be one of those 2 guys. I'm leaning towards Martin. I think this was, I've said it 5 times in this video, but I think this was a crazy version of Martin. And then I guess the other question for you guys, what do you think happened with Keon here? Was it just a size thing? Is he just still too small? Has he not had enough time to have a full proper offseason to grow and put on size for open bodybuilding? Was it a condition thing? I do think he was a little soft in some poses, and soft is kind of a relative term here, because I don't think he was off. I think he looked comparable to the Olympia look, and I think in certain shots he looked harder than Krizo and Joan, with a better structure and a better shape, but just not as much size. So I guess that's what I'm wondering. Is it just a size thing? Or is there a chance the judges are kind of playing mind games here, and Keon, is there a chance he is in the top 3? Because again, you know, that final call out, they didn't move Keon, but in the way that they moved the other guys, they did let him stand next to Martin, stand next to Krizo and Samson, all at different points in that call out. So he did technically get compared with them, but he wasn't compared with them as him being in the center, which is like the strongest indicator of who's the top 2, who's going to win. He was just always on the outside, which to me, it looks like he's going to be 5th. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification icon if you have not already. And as always, I love you guys, appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at Nick Strength Power, my Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power, my secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.